Okay.
Ah, yeah.
Welcome to our Tween Teen Book Talk with middle grade authors, Kaela Rivera, who wrote 3 CC Rio stories, and Bruce Jacobs with Zeke Zuter. He's working on the second book. And I'm Lyndi Allison, a middle grade young adult author of 2 young adult science fantasy trilogies. You'll find our bios in the description. So family relationships, they influence our middle graders and young adults. So as with real life, they show up in our stories. Some relationships are healthy, like that of Ben with his mom in Ray Knightley's Alien Skills series. Some parents might be absent due to illness, death, or abandonment, like Harry Potter's. Others are abusive, like Potter's guardian relatives. Siblings and extended family factor into the characters' lives as well, like Randi in Cristy Watson's On Cue, who cares for her special needs brother. Today, we're going to talk about the role that families play in the middle grade and young adult books that we read and write. So Kaela, do you want to start us off and tell us about what you've been reading and the family dynamic in the story?
Yes. Well, I'm so excited about this subject, and I know we talked about it in our last episode. So go and view our last episode on our subjects. It's really great. Uh, but I'm so excited about it because, like, there's so much change in the evolution from middle grade through young adult and like how you approach family. Everything from being really close to your family to pulling away to like separating to coming back, all of that. It's really amazing. And I really like the way that Love Sugar Magic incorporates family, particularly in the story. So it's about, the main character who she's the youngest of like several sisters. Yeah. I think she has like 4 older sisters, and she's like, and there's a certain age at which in the family you receive your magic. And she does, like, you're not even allowed to tell the younger siblings about it until they're that age. But she discovers it on accident. And then she starts tinkering with it because she's mad that her sisters withheld all this information from her. But I love the way that Ana Meriano actually weaves like the family being in the magic together is actually a really important part, because they discover when she messes up and like does some big spells that end not well. And her older sister's like, it's okay, once they find out, because she gets desperate enough to tell them. She's like, it's okay. We can undo your spells. That's part of being family, is like, because we have that in place because you're learning. And she's like, oh, yay, that's wonderful. And then they try to undo it and it doesn't work because she hadn't been tied into the family magic like she was supposed to have been. It's because she wanted to go off on her own and prove she was a big girl. And now there's some problems with that. But I love the way that they kind of resolve it together and that it becomes this thing that also brings them closer. Like at first it's a little bit of a rift and then it brings them closer. And the way that the magic is just very familial. It's really beautiful. I also love the way that the mother and father are represented throughout the book, as like coming in closer and farther away, zooming in and out at different points. But it's definitely focused on like siblings, that one. Another one I like is Alliana, Girl of Dragons by Julie Abe. I read that. I think it came out like last year. I don't know, but it was really good. Now it's a classic like Cinderella retelling, right? Set in sort of a Japanese inspired fantasy world, which I really like. And it's actually sort of a prequel to the Ava Evergreen books, but it's quite lovely. What I like is 'cause Cinderella is actually a story about, abusive family, whether they're step family or not, they become part of your family. And so it does explore that, certainly, abusive step siblings, as well as like which ones are truly abusive and hate you, and which ones are sort of like becoming abusive because they're following along with the pattern of the abusive parent, which is always interesting. And then there's one character who stands out because, unlike Cinderella, she has a grandmother character, and it's actually her step family's mother, so her stepmother's mother, if I remember right. And no, maybe it is actually her dad. I don't remember, but it's just a grandparent. I think she's not actually related to her because that was part of the interesting part, is that she was married in. But this grandmother becomes this very loving character for Alliana in the Cinderella role. And she doesn't tell her grandmother how she's being treated and things like that, which is unfortunate. But the way that this matriarch ends up sort of scaffolding her understanding of her worth, as well as her love for her, and kind of showing her that she is loved so she doesn't forget because her father is gone. Now, it's a really emotional moment in the book when the grandmother is eventually separated from her and stuff like that. But it really creates the path for Aliana being like, wait, I do deserve better and I can stand up and I am worth something, is because there was even just one linchpin matriarch left to remind her of those things before she was gone. And I love that. I guess the whole span of like good and not good, and how close you are to your family and how you pull apart. And because middle grade particularly is an age where you're trying to separate yourself to understand who you are without your family, but also you still need your family. So both a Cinderella story, where your family is something you really want to be separated from, as well as, but you also still need some of that scaffolding love from a family, as well as in Love Sugar Magic, where she's trying to pull away from her family because she wants to be a big girl too, and they treat her like a little girl. Um, but she ends up still really needing them because that gets her into all kinds of trouble. They're both really good explorations of what it feels like to grow up. Yeah.
Wow, I love the way you take that idea of, the pulling away and then the coming in together. That's a great way to share that.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of bend and stretch, a lot of elastic banding in growing up.
Sounds good. Okay, what about you, Bruce? You got this great lineup of books that you'd like to share. What did they have to share about families?
Oh yeah, there's so many good ones. I was actually struggling to think of. I almost can't think of a book that doesn't deal with family in some way or another. But um, two that two that I've read recently, and one in particular, The Remarkable Journey of Coyote's Sunrise by Dan Gemeinhart, is a book about a little girl who is on a journey across the United States in a school bus with her dad, and her dad that she calls Rodeo, not dad. And he calls her Coyote and not by her real name. And you don't find out like why at first until later in the book, and you realize that they're both struggling to put this without revealing too much, but this really tragic experience behind them, dealing with other members of their family, um, and coming to grips, with the death of, I guess I am gonna spoil it after all, the death of uh, Coyote's mother and sisters. So I just loved how they were on a journey of discovery across the U.S., but really they were on a journey of healing as well, as they were trying to deal with this tragic event that had happened in their past, and the actions that the little girl has to take, Coyote, to help her dad kind of process that event and come to terms with it. Because really, what he's doing is running from it, right? They're trying to run away from this horrible event that happened, and they won't even go near their home state, Washington State, um, where this had happened. But along the way, there's this found family as well, and I really love you see so much of that in books nowadays of found family, especially for middle grade age. Like Kaela said, they're going out into the world, and they're trying to discover, really who they are and what their gifts are, and what um, who they are inside, and what their meaning is in this life. So it's this really vulnerable time, but I just loved the proactive nature of this little girl, as she and her dad embrace these other characters that come into the book and join them on the bus, and they're taking them around to the places that they need to go and helping them deal with the challenges that they're facing, helps them, as they determine, in the end, that they have to go back and they have to confront their past. And so just such a beautiful book, and I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't read it yet. It's The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise. And one of my all-time favorites would be Holes by Louis Sakar. And that plot just revolves heavily around Stanley and his dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. And you learn that early in the book, and it's just like, what? I have to know what this is about. So, probably most of our listeners have read this book, but, Stanley can't break the curse of Camp Green Lake, or the curse of his family's own bad luck, unless he can go back and unless he can fix or make right a mistake that his ancestor made and he ends up carrying the descendant of Madame Zeroni up the mountain to drink from the life-giving spring. And that really heavily influenced, I didn't realize it at the time, but it really heavily influenced what I was writing in my books, because it deals a lot with the relationship between us today and family, our current family, but also family from the past. So I've talked enough, but Lyndi, what have you encountered in either middle grade or young adult books that you've been reading that deal with family?
I have to agree with you. Family shows up in all of these stories. Sometimes, like Kaela says, the pulling away, and in young adults, sometimes it's further away. In my case, later, I'll talk about how they teleport light years away from their family. But I'm going to talk about Josh Stone in the Fifth World, and this is by S.M. Leduc. So Josh, his father is no longer part of their family, and his little sister, the book opens, she's completely upset by the fact that her dog Molly is missing. And so they've already experienced a loss, and this is just another one that they're going through. So Josh, who considers himself the man of the house, he decides to make it his responsibility to find the dog. He goes in search, some of the typical ways that kids try to find a dog. He also consults with the pet store owner to see if anyone, might have let him know about the dog's whereabouts. But as he starts to search for this dog, he becomes aware that there's something much more that's going on, and that Molly and the other cats and dogs aren't just family pets. They're just not the fur babies that we all love, but they are actually part of this Earth Federation force who protects the families. And they've all pulled together because there's an evil entity that's coming the way of Earth. And so Josh becomes this reluctant hero. And he has a little band of friends who help him as they try to, first of all, figure out what's going on. They start their search with Molly, and then they uncover some of this plot to harm the people on Earth. And Josh rises up reluctantly to take a role in protecting his family and the other families on Earth. Family is very, very important to him, and he wants to make sure they're safe. He finds this crystal skull. And this crystal skull in the story is quite an interesting artifact. It's what the evil entity is after, gathering several of these crystal skulls in order to increase their power. And so the stakes are high, in a similar way to what my books would be. Other beings on Earth, who are coming against the people on Earth, evil entities that are against them. And, rising up to have to bring about some form of protection. And then in the second book, Josh is going to be called upon to continue to protect his family. That book's called Josh Stone and the Secrets of the Mayan Codex. Now, in Barbara Baker's Summer of Lies, this is a book set in Banff. So if you're a fan of Out West Canada, there's lots of wilderness adventures in it. And this book features Jillian, who is 14. She lived in Toronto, but she's moved to Banff. Her mom has sent her there to live with her aunt in a remote cabin in the wilderness. something she's not very happy about, particularly since she gets no reception and loses her connection to the people back home. But she does have this ulterior motive, and that is she is determined she is going to find out who her dad is. Her mom is kept silent on the matter, and Jillian just needs to know. So she visits the local library, and then she visits this nursing home because there's an old woman who lives there, and she's just like the funniest character, this Mrs. Bronigan with her bright lipstick. And she is asking lots of questions about who her dad can be, and so she starts to speculate on it. And then she starts to try and contact people who she thinks might be her dad. And so this takes her through a whole other series of searches. And I'll be better than Bruce on this one. I won't do the spoiler on that one to let you know what you find. But as she continues to research, she uncovers way bigger family secrets. And her mom and aunt and grandparents have been lying to her. And her dad doesn't even know of her existence. So, what it's like at 14, it's kind of hard to figure out who you are, without all this stuff going on. But because of her family mix-up and how her family is shifting, she's really struggling to determine who she is. She even asks at one point, who am I anyway? So we see some big changes occurring as she learns to navigate this new truth that she's discovered. Then in the second book, Jillian's desire to get to know her father comes back. It's called What About Me? And in this one, it deals with grief issues similar to my books. Her Oma has passed away, her Opa is sick, and amid a whole series of various incidents, through mountain climbing and skiing, Jillian finally meets her dad and learns about his family. But meeting him doesn't answer all her questions. It actually raises a whole bunch more. And she has to take some time to decide if she's ready to get to know him and his family. So like in my stories, Gloria, who struggles to manage her self-esteem, my character would rather write stories like her dad did than work with her mom in the lab, and he's gone. So these absent fathers feature, often prominently in the young adult and also middle grade books. So Kaela, I'm coming back to you because you've been writing these fabulous CC stories. I love the first book. I haven't read the second one yet, but I certainly will want to. And family is pretty important in your story. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd say that family is like a really strong core in the CC series. I mean, it starts with Cece's older sister getting kidnapped and her being like, God, I have to do whatever it takes to get her back. So it's a very even tied into the motivation that propels the whole series forward. And as with each book, you also realize that it kind of goes deeper into the Rios family. So there's multiple touch points, and I was trying to represent several different kind of relationships you might have in your family, and not just sibling and parent, but different levels of getting along.
Oh, that.
So yeah, yeah. And how
So
you can
key
love
at that
people.
age.
Yeah, yes. And how you can
I
love
ate
people
too.
who yeah. It can be so hard. I mean, I had a mouth on me growing up, so yeah. Getting along was something I learned. But of course, there's some main Rios family relationships, and then there's the Criatora family relationships. And then there's the found family trope Bruce was talking about, where those Criatora family members actually become kind of welded into the Rios family, where they sort of they eventually live in the same house, they are on this adventure together, they call each other familia. And I really love that personally. I know I wrote it, but I still love it.
You're allowed to do that.
Thanks. I need permission. But so it starts Cece, of course, is she's I explore it mostly from her point of view, particularly because she's sort of the outsider in her family, in her community, in most ways, she's doesn't know how to belong because she doesn't seem to be what anybody wants. She's a very emotional crybaby who has big feelings and can get really swept away in them and has very big fears in a people like in a community who is like, fear is a no-no here because we face hardships all the time. We are tough, we are hard, and we do not cry. We are ready to defeat our enemies whenever there's an opportunity, like stuff like that. And she's just not that kind of person. And that, of course, creates friction culturally within their family as well, like when you size down from the community. So with her mom is also kind of a big feelinged person, but you can't, it's hard to know that until like the rest of the books go along. Because her mother is also like, I have seen things. So there's like some level of trauma her mother is carrying. And so she's gotten hard and determined, and even sometimes mean, like occasionally mean, because she's trying to protect her daughters and has seen a lot of bad things happen. Her own sister became a bruja and sent criaturas after their mother, and she watched her mother die. So like that's a lot for a person to deal with. And so like Cece ends up bearing some of the brunt of that until Mama sort of softens and realizes that like, wait, maybe there's another way to keep my children safe. And once she has that option, she starts to grow. And Cece gets to watch that happen throughout the books too. And so Cece and her Mama, their relationship changes, particularly from book 1 to 2. And I really like watching that happen. Because your parents are also growing people, and that's something that like is a tough part of growing up from middle grade through young adult, even to adulthood, where you're like, oh my gosh, you didn't actually know everything, and I assumed you did and was mad at you, but like you're a person like me and are also trying to figure it out, and realizing that is like a whole adventure anyway. But Cece gets to watch a little of that with her mother. Her father, on the other hand, like I actually love how much children hate the dad in this in my book. Like I've gotten letters from kids who are like, I love this book. It is my favorite book. I do not like the dad. And I have like villains, I have like scary villains. I
You've done it
have
right.
a
Yeah.
yeah. I have a criatura who steals women from their families and steals them into another world. I have Rodrigo, the soul stealer, who like rips Cece's soul out of her chest. Like I've got like big scary bad guys, but the one they always talk about is they're like, I don't like the dad, and I'm like, it's a good taste. Yes, you are not meant to. And it's because he is very cold, and Cece doesn't know how to work with him, like as a person, even like she doesn't understand why he won't receive any of her love. She knows she's not really on the receiving end of any of his love. She knows that it's an unsteady relationship there to begin with, and she's kind of afraid of him. There's a moment where Cece runs back into the town when Juana, her older sister, is taken, and she's crying out for help to get her sister back. And the dad stops in front of her and asks her what she's doing, and she clams up completely, even though she was just begging for help. But then she sees her mom and immediately like throws herself into her mother's arms. So trying to like establish that like this is not a safe relationship between Cece and her dad. But there is a point later where he also hits her because he's very upset that she's become a bruja. And then the mom also loses it and is like, how dare you touch my child? And I was like, yeah, mom, I get him. Yeah. So like,
She becomes Mama Bear at that point. I remember that part. So.
yes, where she's like, no, and she's like grabbing criaturas and pushing them. She's grabbing her husband and pushing him now.
Yeah.
Everybody stop. And I love that. um, which also shows a sort of different in priorities. What I'm trying to kind of show as well is like the dad is not a safe relationship. And in the second book, big spoilers, I'm doing a Bruce too. Big spoilers, the dad does leave in the second book, and then it's this sort of reconciling of like, what do we do now that our dad is gone? Because even though he was never a safe relationship for any of them, really, he was still like a part of the structural, like he was one of the pillars of the family, and you're left with that hole when they go. So trying to grapple, I know a lot of people don't like that in stories with abusive people, is like missing them or loving them or mourning that relationship you had with an abusive person. but I wanted to make it safe because there are a lot of children who have to deal with that. And it is okay to love the person who was abusive to you. It is okay to mourn them and wish they had gotten better, wish you could have had a good relationship, and still have to be separated, you know? And so I wanted, like, I know it's a tough subject, but I really thought that was important, especially since sort of the CC is very much an exploration of family and of abuse and of how to treat each other right. And if you're going to talk about that, I want kids to know that they can still be main characters even if they experience that, and that it's okay to still love them and let them go and move on. And that contrasts, I think, really well with some of the really warm relationships that kind of, like, you know, we're giving you example of bad and good relationships, because CC also has to stand out from her family, and figure out her own way because they can't really scaffold that for her. And she makes her found family friends with the criaturas, and she creates a better relationship with her sister throughout the books, where her sister's like, oh, I guess you are strong. It's just in a different way than me, and I didn't realize you could do that. And Cece's like, me neither. I just found out. And so they have like this, where they're sort of realigning in the second book their opinions of each other, which I think is a lot of growing up with your siblings, particularly, where you're like, oh, I still just remember you were the one who always stole the cereal, you know. So you're the selfish one. But like they grew up and they don't steal the cereal anymore, you know. So they're not the selfish one anymore. Or even like you were the crybaby and you're like, yeah, but she still gets things done. That's okay. You know? So sort of relearning relationships as well, where you're growing up together, and then finding these really good relationships that Cece ends up having with her criaturas, her criatura friends, the criatura crew is what I like to call them. Where they build this mutual respect, and trust and hope with each other, because the criaturas have been longing for relationships where they get to be family and where they get to feel safe with people. And Cece has too. So then they end up finding that in each other, which kind of scaffolds for the rest of the Rios family what that means, where it's kind of people just trying to figure out how to be good to each other, which is a lot of growing up, because like I don't write contemporary because it is too emotionally painful to me to write that stage where you're being bad friends to each other. I'm like, it hurts, but it's a very real part of growing up, you know.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to create a world outside of your family with your friends, but you're not really good at it still. So you're still like, well, yeah, and I don't want to play with you anymore if you don't want to do what I want to do. And they're like, whoa, I don't want to be friends anymore. You know. So it's interesting because it's kind of like we're practicing with our friends, which become our found family as we grow as well. How relationship and family dynamics works outside of the home, because these are new. They are like, they can be changed when we're younger, whereas in the family we don't really know how to change those dynamics at that age. But as you get to young adult, you certainly do. You certainly start being like, no, things are going to change around here. Even if it's me painting my room black and blasting angry music.
Joy.
Yeah.
Well, Cece certainly has some great character development. And, you know, she's so brave. She used to stand up and make choices that her family wouldn't necessarily approve of. Well, not
Yeah.
wouldn't, they don't approve of, but she's doing
Yeah.
such a great reason. And so, you know, we're all admiring her bravery, particularly when she's encountering those people those beings you describe. It's like,
Yeah. And that is an important part of that age, you know, is that like realizing that, you know, your family might not like, you know, they're like, oh, hiking, let's just say hiking, you know, is scary. Don't go out there because I heard people die sometimes. And that's true. But like that doesn't mean all hiking is actually bad. So you try it out, you know, and that a lot of that age is realizing that there's a world outside of your family and exploring it. And Cece has to do that for her family, actually. She actually has to go against her family for her family. But she also then on that mission learns, most importantly, I think, like the kind of person she is and what is good, and that following what is good is the most important thing to her, even when her family has lost track of what that is. so it's a whole journey, right?
Yeah. That's one of the things I love most about middle grade is because at that age, kids are really emerging and they're in this process of self-discovery and world discovery and this time of real vulnerability. And I think that I mean I love the fact that you're exploring complex relationships with Cece and even abusive relationships. And I think that maybe in the past, there was a lot of in the middle grade community, there was sort of a that's a no-no, mentality. Like you got to avoid the tough subjects, but I don't believe that at all. I think for one thing, unfortunately, a lot of kids out there go through this, and
Right.
books like that can really help kids process and can give them kind of an empathetic character or help them see a source of strength that they can then find in themselves when they read about characters who deal with it. But I also think that kids are, middle graders are extraordinarily resilient, more than we give them credit for. And they do manifest a lot of ability to deal with those very types of issues that that you were writing about in your book. And uh, um, it actually um, it actually is a it's fun. It was interesting to me when I read Cece because I think I just published Zeke, and we both in both of our books we have a character who's dealing with with a father who had an abusive relationship with the character and with alcohol. So with in mine, it's a little different because Zeke's dad is no longer on this world. He's passed away, and so I have to I have to portray that relationship by using flashbacks to what's happened in the past. And as I was writing it, it was a process of self-discovery for me too. I'm fortunate to say I do not have that experience in my own life. My dad's still with us, and he's a fantastic man. Lest anybody think that there was any connection there, there's not. Um, but with Zeke, he's not only dealing with the grief of losing his father, and I loved what you said about it's okay to have feelings of love for people who have been abusive toward us or toward other members of our family, because that's exactly what Zeke's going through. He's he's experiencing a tremendous amount of guilt over what happened to his dad, and he's blaming himself for it when he really shouldn't. And he also has to confront the really hard truth that his dad was not going to fix this problem on his own. And he spends most of the book falsely believing that if he could somehow bring his dad back, that it would be different this time. And that's a tough lesson, for a lot of us to learn, is that people have to change on their own, and we can't force them to do it. So there's that relationship. Zeke's also got this relationship with his grandmother, who's always telling him stories about their family and their family's family history, and encouraging Zeke with very little success to learn more about his ancestors. And of course, Zeke is stubborn and says, he doesn't see what a bunch of boring dead dudes can teach him. But I really wanted to explore the idea that we can find a lot of strength, and really, and going back to what you were saying, Lyndi, about Jillian and I think Summer of Lies. It was so interesting to me that she spends so much time wanting to know who her father is, and because we can't really, and this is something Zeke's grandma says to him, you don't really know who you are unless you know where you come from and who your family is. And he doesn't buy into that at first, but that's kind of the main theme of my book, is that you can find a lot of strength in learning about the people who've gone before and the sacrifices that they made and the struggles and the challenges that they had to overcome. And when you can see that, that really helps you in your own life. So that's a lot of what happens with Zeke, is as he's on this journey of, you know, trying to defeat the bad guy. He's also kind of magically able to look into the past and see scenes from his great grandfather's life, and the encounters that he had with the very nemesis that Zeke is facing presently, which gives him. So that's kind of where my whole tie-in is, right? Only the difference is I wanted to have there be a little bit more of a connection between the present character and the character from the past, and kind of have Zeke really come to know his ancestor in that way. And by the end, it's the combination of Zeke having really discovered who he is through his almost relationship that he's been able to forge with this person from his past, and being able to finally confront the truth about his dad, that only then gives him the strength and the power he has to find to, you know, to save the day at the end. And there's just something really beautiful, I think, about kids finding their own power and finding that strength. You see it with Cece, you know, as she's learning about who she is inside and what she can do. And you see it in so many middle grade books. And that's, I think, the real joy for me in middle grade is that process of self-discovery and finding inner strength. So
Yeah, I
what
love that
about
in
Lyndi?
children's literature. Like, because
Yeah,
Lyndi, you're like holding up the whole young adult section of this for us. The
yeah.
empowerment of messy teenager to triumphant adult section. How you feel about it?
Well, first, I just want to say how I really appreciated in both your books, even though there are these tough relationships and tough issues, you know, you don't leave your characters in a place where they're stuck and, you know, where there's no hope in it. You know, you're able to share ways that they manage that, what they discover and what they learn. And I think it's your treatment of a tough subject matter that makes that really, really important. So,
Thank you.
yes. So on to young adults. So I have a character in my book named Gloria. She's 15 and she's not getting along very well with her mother. Her mother wants her to go to an after school program for girls who are grieving. Gloria's dad passed away when she was only 6. And she's now 15, so there's some things that, you know, she really needs to process. But Gloria's mad. She's mad because her parents fought the night her dad died. And she blames her mom. You know, if they hadn't had a fight, her dad wouldn't have gone for this walk to cool down and gotten hit by this hover car that we later discover it may not have been totally an accident. But at this point in the story, you know, she's blaming her mom and she hasn't forgiven her. And so there's a lot of angst that goes along with that. And there's a second part that makes her kind of angsty. Gloria's really into the arts. She loves stories. She loves writing stories. And her dad was an author and her favorite person, he's now missing. And Gloria's mad because her mom has her rival, who's an astronomy geek, his name's Jace, working in the lab. And it seems like her mom has lots of time for working with Jace in the lab, but not so much for, you know, bringing their family together. So a fair bit of angst. And like Cece, Gloria takes this really big risk that in this case, she knows it's going to make her mother really angry. And she and Jace steal her mother's teleporter from the observatory where she works to go rescue an alien child. And we'll see in a minute why it's so important for Jace to be on this mission. So also like Cece, you know, she's going against what the family wants to help, you know, save a child from great danger. So fortunately for Gloria, when her mother works to fix the damage done that's been done by an alien in the lab, one that Jace contacted, at least her uncle Ty, or Tyrone, but short for Ty, spend some time with her doing her favorite things. So he'll go out with her to the arts festival when her mom's too busy. He'll even sit through the outdoor Shakespearean plays that she loves, and he listens to her. And it's him that she asks the big questions, like one of her most important ones when she's considering who to date. She uses one of her favorite lines from her Shakespearean play, Much Ado About Nothing. How can she make sure that she's not overmastered by a piece of valiant dust? So that comes up in the love relationship in that story. So there's a little play off Shakespeare and some other works of literature in my stories as well.
Yeah, I love that you've got Shakespeare in this story.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a few glimpses. You know, sometimes you don't have to have the whole play dropped in your lap in your English classroom when,
Right.
you know, it's meant to be performed and not read in the class. So I tried to, you know, pull out some of the interesting parts that teens might be able to relate to. Now, Jace, he's also grieving. In his case, he's grieving the loss of his baby sister, Gabriella. And oh gosh, when I tell his story, it's always so heart-wrenching because he thinks it's his fault. His mom told him to let his baby sister cry so that she could learn to self-soothe and go to sleep. And she cries for a while, and Jace just wants to go to sleep, and he prays that she will be quiet so he can get the sleep he wants. And then in the morning, his mom finds baby Gabriella in her crib, and she's not breathing. And then after his mom has a couple of miscarriages, you know, she is so deep in her grief. You know, she's emotionally unavailable for Jace. So he carries this guilt. And she ends up having a couple more miscarriages and trying to have more children. And she gets so sick with grief that Jace spends a night on a suicide watch for her because he's very concerned she'll take his life. His father is out and away on business. And so, you know, he's got a real heart for his mom. And this plays out in the second trilogy. So first trilogy starts with the lines between our stars, and the second one, the healing of our wounds. So now in this one, Jace and Gloria, they teleport light years because Jace's mom has cancer. And the seeds that are needed to make what she needs in order to heal are on these other planets. So they go planet hopping, encountering all kinds of danger. Sorry, as they try to find these seeds. And we find out just how far Jace is willing to go, how much danger he's willing to put himself in, but also Gloria in order to save his mom. And so a little bit heart-wrenching there. There's a little bit of biographical in my case because my mom died of cancer. And so, you know, it was something that was dear to my heart. So Gloria's mom and her uncle Tyrone, they are now seeing one another. And so as a family, they have been trying to learn to express their grief and to comfort one another. But when Gloria teleports with Jace, his mom gets arrested because it's not legal for them to just, you know, take this teleporter and go off planet hopping. So she's arrested, and Uncle Tyrone is trying to parent as best he can in the absence of Gloria's dad and her mom, but he's new at it. And I kind of wanted to give, you know, youth a little sense of, you know, it's not always easy to know how to parent. And he's not sure whether he's doing a very good job of it or whether he's doing as good a job as Gloria's dad would do. So he talks to his friend about it. And his friend says that, you know, Gloria is good with his parenting. He's honest. He listens to her concerns. And he's also good to her mother. And that's what Gloria needs. And he's also not as new at it as he thinks he is, because he's been playing that role for Gloria ever since her dad passed. Maybe not as formally as when he's in the relationship with her mom, but definitely he was the one who was there for her. And I was trying to, you know, one of the things I like to share with youth, you know, you can go through all kinds of things. And if you have one friend and if you have one, you know, adult who you trust, you know, who you can go to and who you can share with, you can get through a lot of things. And so that was kind of what I was going after in that second trilogy. But you'll have to read it to find out if they get these seeds and if Jace's mom is going to recover.
I'm so glad that you're exploring that idea of imperfect parenting, because I think a lot of times uh, young adults and middle graders, they look at their parents, and when they start to realize at that age pretty quickly that their parents are not perfect people. And then there's a lot of times kind of a lot of anger, like, why are you not a perfect parent? You always were when I was younger, right? And then you realize that's not the case, and it's growth both for the young adults and for the parents to kind of come to terms with that and be able to forgive each other for mistakes. I know that's had to happen in my family, and thank goodness that there is this thing called forgiveness, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And recovery. So I love that your book is titled the healing of our wounds.
Mhm.
Gorgeous. I'm like, yes. Is there a more apt description of family generally? Is like good families heal their wounds together, you know? Because not having wounds isn't really an option, you know, but healing them together is a good option. Yeah.
It's so true, right? Because it's not just even the internal pressures on the family, it's all the external ones that get imposed on the family. And, people respond to them differently based on their maturity or, the fact that they are carrying this grief or this blame. In Jace's case, the self-blame. In mine, Bruce, Jace has to come to forgive himself. And teach his mom to forgive herself. It wasn't her fault that she died. It was a crib death, and that had nothing to do with the fact she was crying the night before. That was just the way it played out. And Gloria has to forgive her mom. It wasn't her fault. Her dad died. There's a whole lot more going on. And as there are all these awarenesses, and as they heal and work together and share some of those things, there is a growing in the relationships. And
Yeah.
That's what these stories are really all about, right? We tend to compartmentalize books like, oh, that's a magic book, that's a fantasy book, that's a space opera, or but really these are just backdrops to telling stories about human beings, and their relationships with each other, and forgiveness and redemption. And was it Faulkner or Hemingway? Faulkner, I think, who said the only thing worth writing about is the human heart in conflict with itself. And I think there's such a seed of truth in that it's we love magic, or we love sci-fi or whatever, but a story is not a good story unless there's those elements involved. So
Yes, like so one of my favorite shows ever is Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I think when I look back, I mean, I just loved it as a kid. I was like, yeah. But as an adult, I'm still like, yeah. But I know more why. And I just love, because the firebending in particular, although all of the elements, but I'm thinking very particular of a particular instance of the firebending, the way the firebending in the story emphasizes the emotional struggles so much. Like for Zuko, Prince Zuko, the last Agni Kai is one of the most emotional moments in the entire series, and it's just like, it's a fight, it's a firebending fight, but it's because everything about that firebending fight serves to emphasize his journey and his journey with his family and with himself, and coming to a triumphant place. It's gorgeous, and that's why I love fantasy. That's why I like science fiction and space. I love all those things because they so well emphasize what we're going through emotionally. It's like it puts it under a magnifying glass, different elements of it, and so we can almost better understand what we're trying to say, because we've removed some of the day-to-day cliches of experience to emphasize how it truly feels, I guess. Like going on a journey through, like you were saying earlier, Lyndi, of she goes light years away from her family because she's upset and has to go on this journey, and that's a perfect way of emphasizing what it feels like when you go on a light years emotional journey away from your family. before hopefully, being able to reconnect.
And then the added element is they lose contact but with their families back home. And I was sort of playing off that idea. I remember with my kids, you sort of feel your kids pulling away and maybe not communicating as much. And then, the coming back together, after that growing up a little bit and some of those things that get healed. And also, Glory becomes extremely concerned for her mom because her actions have landed her, in the, high security prison, so
Yeah, yeah, it's a good
okay,
cause for concern.
mom anymore.
Yeah. Which is also a great way of emphasizing how there's a moment where we get angry as we're growing up. I think everybody does at some point, where they get angry when they realize that they've sort of been living in the consequences of other people's actions, because that's just inevitable as a child, because your parents' wisdom with money affects you, your parents' like love level affects you, like other people's decisions are scaffolding your life at that point. And then you're like, hey, and then so you go out and I'm gonna make the choices now. And then you start to realize what it feels like on the other side of that. We're like, oh, wait, my consequences affect other people. And then you watch that happen firsthand. And you're like, oh, this is a lot of power, actually. So,
I noticed
prison's
that,
a really great way to emphasize that.
my kids tend to get angriest when they're really mad at themselves for the choices they've made, but they have a hard time coming to grips with that. And so it's easier to project outward and blame, right? Instead of accept, oh, I really screwed up. And
Yeah,
but that's part of growing up. That's also part of growing up, is learning to accept responsibility for the choices that we make and forgive others for the choices that they made.
Right, exactly. It's that like turning circle of like, oh, actually, when I'm on here, I don't like it either. Maybe that's why dad didn't make a great decision that one day, is because he also didn't really have enough information to be making decisions, but he has to because he's the dad. Same way, I just made a bunch of mistakes that I don't want to be blamed for.
Okay, this is
Like,
been
that's
a
a big
great
one.
discussion. I'm sure that we could have multiple discussions on this topic.
Oh
Really
yes.
appreciate all that you have shared. So, Kaela, can you tell us about what you're writing now?
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm writing like 5 different things right now. So what I'm going to pick is the thing that I finished most recently, which is a story I'm calling tentatively Forest of Masks. It's a middle grade horror, fantasy horror, where 2 brothers, get trapped in a cursed forest. And they have to escape before sunrise or be trapped there forever, with all of the curses that are in the forest, which are like these masked people, that once they put on the mask, that they were cursed with scary powers, and they want to make them part of them. So
Ooh,
they have to go on this journey together and deal with their grief of their recently departed father at the same time, because the older brother blames the younger brother, but it's also the older brother's fault that they're stuck in there in the first place.
wow, a lot going on there.
Great stakes. I love it. And I
Yeah.
love that
Thanks.
there's a condensed timeline, because that really adds to the sense of urgency, right? When you've only got one night to figure all this out. Nice.
Intensity.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And Bruce, what are you writing about?
Yeah, so I am writing actually the prequel to Zeke Suter, and mine's interestingly enough also dealing with brothers, only twin brothers in this case, and one is going to be going on a hero's journey while the other is going on an anti-hero's journey at the same time. So if I can pull it off, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But this is going to be the sons of the ancestor that Zeke was learning about in the first book, and they are now um, dealing with the fact that their ancestral homeland of Ireland has been attacked by a demon that's been unleashed and is causing the Great Irish Potato Famine. So in my world, the famine isn't actually caused by a blight of the potatoes, but by a sinister fairy creature. that their goal, of course, is to rid the island of all humans and bring it back to just fairies only. So that's what I'm working on now, and I'm still in the early stages, but I hope to make a lot of progress this spring. How about you, Lyndi?
Well, I have diverted a little bit from my earlier path, and I am trying to write, excuse me, an adult psychological thriller on a tough
Ooh.
subject. I do have a middle grade character, so I have 3 points of view, one of which is a middle grade girl. So back when I was teaching, I was teaching the kite runner, and I thought when my students would journal about the part where the young male at the end is trafficked, that they would be like, oh, horrified, you know, that's happening in the world. And as it turned out, I was shocked and horrified because some of my students wrote that they had been trafficked. And so that's the difficult subject matter that I'm grappling with and trying to present. It is an adult book, and it is a thriller, but I also, I just, in their honor, want to present that in a way that isn't degrading or has that hopeful recovery and also prevention for others. So it's a big thing I tackled. And plus, I don't know why. Well, they say adult books are mostly third person past tense. So that's a big shift for me. My books are written first person present tense. So different genre, a different style of writing. So I'm almost done. I think the first draft, almost finished, last few chapters.
Great.
Trying to bring all those lives together in that moment, and have it come out the way it's supposed to. So that's what I'm right. So Kaela, anything else you'd like to add, or?
I just said y'all are awesome and hi.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Kaela, and Bruce too, for both of you and your wonderful, keen insights that I'm going to have a hard time parting with your books, because when I finish my middle grade books, I try to donate them to the international schools here. And
Oh, I love that.
yours is the Mexican legends, so some Latina in there. I think it will go well, and the myth in yours as well, Bruce. Great stories that we can encourage them to be telling about their heritage. So I think they're important to share with the youth here. So I thank you for that.
Thank you for donating. That's awesome.
You're welcome. Okay, so thank you to everyone who listened in. We invite you to suggest any topics in any of the comments. We're willing to explore those with you at a future time. And in the meantime, we say keep reading and keep writing.